This is a poem by Mary Oliver called The Sunflowers. Come with me into the field of sunflowers. Their faces are burnished discs. Their dry spines creak like ship masts. Their green leaves, so heavy and many, fill all day with the sticky sugars of the sun. Come with me to visit the sunflowers. They are shy but want to be friends. They have wonderful stories of when they were young, the important weather, the wandering crows. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. Their bright faces, which follow the sun, will listen, and all those rows of seeds, each one a new life, hope for a deeper acquaintance. Each of them, though it stands in a crowd of many like a separate universe, is lonely. The long work of turning their lives into a celebration is not easy. Come and let us talk with those modest faces, the simple garment of leaves, the coarse roots in the earth, so uprightly burning. I began writing this sermon last weekend, Sunday, February 27th, from Florida, where my friend Peter Bulata and I spent a lot of time following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Many of you remember Peter from 2019. He was our sabbatical minister in the month of December, and I was really grateful to have him as a conversation partner as we anxiously followed the news. One thing that we saw right away was a conversation happening among liberal and progressive leaders and anti-racism activists that pointed out an important fact, which is that the West's response to this invasion was emotional, it was intense, immediate, outraged, and accompanied by shows of solidarity, when there was not a similarly engaged outcry over invasions and military aggression in, for instance, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Palestine. Charlie DeGatta, a CBS News reporter, was skewered for saying, and you could see him kind of fumbling as he was speaking on the issue. He said, "I'm trying to be careful how I say this, but," and then he says it anyway, "Ukraine is more civilized." Several angry respondents replied to DeGatta, "You mean more white?" And he apologized, reminding us, the commentators were reminding us all that Europeans have killed tens of millions of their own people in the last century or so, so you know, who you calling civilized? A lively conversation ensued and needs to continue about what civilized means, how we unpack that word for the past, the present, and the future. And then there is the extraordinary heroism of Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, who, in a world where re-electability and inoffensive, vague sound bites are political priorities in democratic nations, has emerged as a portrait in courage, surviving to date 3 assassination attempts and any number of just sorrows and worries and concerns in a continued bombardment. God keep him safe. He appears on our televisions or on our phones or devices, exhausted, angry, refreshingly honest, in combat fatigues, alongside his people, and begging for more intervention from the West. I remember that I had made sarcastic comments about Zelensky when he was elected. Another television star with absolutely no political experience ascended to the presidency. What good can come of that? But Zelensky has more than proven his mettle. And yes, like many of our Generation X cohort, he is media and social media savvy. We see that all of these things can work together in a person with integrity. And Zelensky will go down in history as a tremendous figure, delivering legendary phrases for posterity such as, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." We see images of Ukrainians gathered together to assemble Molotov cocktails, homemade bombs, that they will use against Putin's armies. Soldiers whose own feelings about the invasion they are forced to fight on behalf of their megalomaniac dictator will never know. We're starting to hear from some Russians about what they think, and it's not always in solidarity with their leader. They are under a fascist regime and are themselves in danger. I stare at these images of people gathered to make bombs, and it looks for all the world like our own community gathered to assemble food donations for my brother's table, until you look really closely and you realize, oh, these bottles and all of this equipment, they're making actual bombs, and my mind just struggles to process that. It's all ages, people in regular clothes, they're not soldiers. Okay, all right. Meanwhile, for the older generation of Americans, they cope with rising memories of World War II, a conflict that directly involved many of their loved ones here and overseas. And so for these people, yes, they care about war everywhere. Yes, we, and I include myself in this, do care about Yemen and Syria. And yes, it is also human nature to react differently when the contours and shapes of an attack take us back in memory to lands where our relatives lived and fled as refugees, or were transported to concentration camps or gulags and murdered or fought and were murdered or fought and died. And of course, Zelensky, as a Jewish Ukrainian, also has that generational memory. I'm the granddaughter of Slovaks and Romanians, so have a lot of connection to the region in my family history. For those who remember and still carry the tension of the Cold War in their bodies and cellular memory, it's only natural to have a visceral sense of upset about what is happening in Ukraine. There is the added shock in 2022 that so many Americans now, their minds addled by the Trumpian propaganda machine, support Russia and are pro-Putin, including some of our elected officials in Congress of the United States of America. It is to be in the upside down. To this we've come. How profoundly dismaying for millions of Americans, and especially veterans of the armed forces who fought the communists. Of all the stories and images that have emerged from this conflict, however, none compelled me more immediately than the clip that made the rounds of a Ukrainian woman confronting a heavily armed Russian soldier in Henichek last week. And that's the thing about now, we can see things almost as they are happening through social media. I'm going to read right now a transcript of this very brief conversation. And there are expletives in it which I'm going to edit out, but not completely take out, because I don't want to overly sanitize this exchange that I think we need to hear in its honesty. So it begins with the woman. She says she walks up to the soldier just a civilian woman. She's dressed for the winter, and he's standing there. "Who are you?" she says. The soldier responds, "We have exercises here. Please go this way." "What kind of exercises? Are you Russian?" "Yes." "So what the F are you doing here?" "Right now, our discussion will lead to nothing. You're occupants. You're fascists. What the F are you doing on our land with all these guns? Take these seeds. Take these seeds and put them in your pockets. So at least sunflowers will grow when you all lie down here." The soldier says, "Right now, our discussion will lead nowhere. Let's not escalate this situation, please." "What situation? Guys, put the sunflower seeds in your pockets, please. You will lie down here with the seeds. You came to my land. Do you understand? You are occupiers. You are enemies." The soldier says, "Yes. And from this moment, you are cursed, I'm telling you." The soldier says, "Now listen to me. I've heard you. Let's not escalate this situation," he says. "Please go this way." "How can it be further escalated? You effing came here uninvited, pieces of..." And that's all we have. That's what we saw. There is a spiritual practice called Lectio Divina, sacred reading, where you read a passage of scripture or other spiritual text several times over and ask questions as you get deeper into the text. What in this passage resonates with me? It's one of the questions. Where does it shimmer? To me, this conversation, this exchange on the street of Henichek, resonated as a sacred text. Dialogue so honest, so urgent, so bare bones. It brought to my mind the language of the Psalms, many of which were also composed in wartime, under conditions of military displacement or occupation. Psalm 137 is one such psalm, probably the hardest and most disturbing of all of the 150 of them. It was composed by an anonymous Jewish voice, confronting the armies who forced their people into exile. This is the Babylonian exile. And also, to add insult to terrible injury, mocked and insulted their God and their faith to their God, their very identity as a people. Some of you will recognize this psalm as the basis for the song On the Willows from the musical Godspell. And I'll just read like the last part of the psalm. And there are other songs also based on this psalm, by the way. "By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps. Daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction, happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us. Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks." This psalm is almost never read in its entirety in churches. It is so violently vengeful and sad. Many readings end it before that last stanza. But we want to be people who courageously acquaint ourselves with the shadows of the human experience in order to understand ourselves and the world better, which we cannot do by sanitizing and erasing the tragedy of it. So in doing this, we have to be willing to look at the human inclination to curse as well as to bless. The sunflower seed woman does both. I think she somehow manages to do both, to kind of fold a blessing into her curse, which is why she fascinates me and millions of other people who watched that confrontation. Aside from the woman's righteous rage, I notice she doesn't say when you die or when you are killed. She says when you lie down with the seeds. It's so sad. It's so surprisingly gentle an image. And in it, I hear, however subtly, a sense of humanity. I don't know if I'm making too much of this. I talked to a friend who speaks Ukrainian, and she said, she's speaking Russian. And I thought, well, of course she is. She's talking to a Russian. Perhaps when you lie down is a bad translation of Russian. Maybe it's a colloquialism that means when you bite the dust or something like that. I don't know. But as she vents that outrage, her disgust, and her truth, you are fascists, you are occupiers, you are the enemy. She also kind of puts this blessing in with the curse. You're going to die, but I want your death to leave and generate something beautiful. The sunflower is the national flower of Ukraine. So of course there's like a nationalistic triumphalism in that. The soldier, and again, who knows if he actually supports this invasion, or if he is thinking of, or how much he might not want to kill and be killed, how much fear he might have, we don't know, has been trained to be highly impassive. He represents the cold machinery of war. Our discussion, he says, will lead nowhere. He reminds her that in the time-honored tradition of militaristic dehumanization, he is carrying an AK-15. He has a job to do, and it doesn't involve listening. Even though he can hear her, he's not going to listen to her. I do notice that he responds with a validation of her cries that you are the enemy, you are an occupier. He says yes. Is he proud of that fact? Does he care about what that means for her? We have no way of knowing this. He has been trained. He has been trained. Now, as to the Ukrainian woman, and this is interesting to me that she's been called again and again in the media, she's been referred to as a grandmother. But we don't know if she's a mother or a grandmother at all. I just think that's really interesting. She actually sounds quite young to me. But if you want to simply pronounce a curse, you do that. You invoke destruction. You call down the powers of failure and death. You basically do what is done in Psalm 137 and say, I will never forsake my God, my country, and my land that you're forcing me off of. May a terrible fate await you and your children, exactly what you did to us. That's a curse. I have never before heard a curse that says, may beauty grow where your body falls. She doesn't wish him or his people a terrible death. She could have. She does not curse him and his children with punishment. She could have. She did not pronounce a curse upon his nation. She could have. She came with seeds, the symbol of transformation. She came up unarmed with anything but those seeds and the truth of her words, and she tried to get a soldier to accept them. Please, she asked him, please. I want to leave her there. I want to leave the Ukrainian woman and that soldier there in respect for the fact that they are continuing to live their stories well over 4,000 miles from here, knowing that we will probably never learn how those stories end, But she has left us seeds. The seeds we can take with us. The seeds we can put in our own pockets, please. A reminder that whatever conflict, danger, misunderstanding, fear, and sorrow exist, so too does the possibility of transformation. We pray for all of them.